The day my husband was buried, I stood alone beside his coffin. No son at my side. No family behind me. Not even the woman I once called my best friend. The church pews were nearly empty, their silence louder than any sob. As the priest spoke, my eyes kept drifting to the entrance, foolishly hoping someone, anyone, would walk in late, breathless, apologetic. But no one came. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about grief. This was about abandonment. For years, I believed I was part of a family. A wife. A mother. A friend. But standing there, watching the casket slowly descend into the ground, I realized a truth far more painful than my husband's death. In their eyes, I had never truly belonged. And what I was about to uncover next would shatter everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. I used to believe that no matter how broken a family became, death would bring people back together. I was wrong. On the morning of my husband's funeral, I woke up before dawn, staring at the ceiling of a house that suddenly felt too large and too empty. The other side of the bed was cold, had been cold for days, but that morning the silence pressed harder against my chest than ever before. My husband's name was Richard Miller. We had been married for 27 years. 27 years of shared bills, shared holidays, shared disappointments and moments that, at the time, felt ordinary. I thought those years counted for something. I thought they meant I wasn't alone. I got dressed slowly, my hands trembling as I buttoned a black dress I had worn only once before, at Richard's mother's funeral. Back then our son stood beside us holding my hand. Back then my best friend Laura sat in the front row, squeezing my shoulder whenever I cried. That lie carried me all the way to the church. The chapel smelled faintly of old wood and lilies. The casket was already there, closed, polished, impossibly final. I stood frozen for a moment at the entrance, scanning the room. A few distant relatives from Richard's side. 2 neighbors who looked uncomfortable, as if unsure whether they truly belonged there. But the front pews, the ones meant for family, were empty. I felt my throat tighten. My son Ethan was supposed to sit there. My only child. The boy I stayed up nights with when he had fevers. The boy whose college tuition Richard and I sacrificed years to pay. Laura should have been there too. She knew everything about my marriage. She knew my fears, my regrets, my guilt. She had promised me just months ago, no matter what happens, I've got your back. I sat alone. As the service began, the priest spoke about love, commitment, and the pain of loss. His words floated past me, barely registering. My mind was somewhere else, counting absences instead of memories. Every few minutes I glanced toward the door. Still nothing. That's when a terrible thought crept in, one I tried desperately to push away. What if they weren't late? What if they weren't coming at all? My chest ached, not from sobbing but from holding everything in. Grief is heavy, but rejection is heavier. It settles deeper. It makes you question things you never dared to before. Had I missed something? Had I done something unforgivable? Or had I simply been convenient, useful when needed, invisible when not? As the priest invited family members to come forward, no one moved. Not for Richard. Not for me. And in that moment, sitting alone beside my husband's coffin, I began to sense that this funeral wasn't just the end of his life. It was the beginning of a truth I had been protected from for years. The service ended quietly. Too quietly. There was no line of mourners offering condolences. No warm embraces. No whispered apologies for being late. One by one, the few people who had come drifted away, leaving me standing alone beside Richard's coffin. I waited until the last hymn faded before reaching for my phone again. Still nothing. A notification, half hidden on my lock screen, disappeared the moment I unlocked my phone. My heart skipped. I checked my messages, my call log, even my email. Nothing new. But I knew what I had seen. Later that afternoon, back in the house that still smelled like Richard's cologne, I sat at the kitchen table staring at his old tablet. He hadn't used it much during the last year of his life. Cancer had taken his strength, then his patience, then his voice. But the device was still logged into his email. I don't know what made me open it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the quiet terror that comes when everyone you trust disappears at the same time. There it was. A group email thread. The subject line made my stomach twist. About the funeral. My name wasn't on it. The first message was from Laura. I don't think it's a good idea for us to go. She'll make it uncomfortable. This day should be about Richard. My hands began to shake as I scrolled. My son Ethan replied next. I agree. I don't want to deal with her emotions right now. Her emotions. As if my grief were an inconvenience. As if 27 years of marriage had reduced me to a problem they didn't feel like managing. Another message followed, short, cold. We should keep our distance. It's better this way. No one questioned it. No one defended me. No one even asked if I was okay. I sat there for a long time, the tablet heavy in my hands, my mind replaying every moment I had shared with them. Holidays, birthdays, hospital visits, late-night conversations where I had believed we were honest with each other. Had they always talked about me like this? Or had something changed, something I hadn't seen coming? What hurt most wasn't their decision to stay away. It was how easily they agreed. No anger, no guilt, no hesitation. I realized then that their absence at the funeral wasn't sudden. It had been planned. And if they were willing to abandon me on the worst day of my life, I had to wonder what else they had already decided without me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, one question echoed louder than my grief. What had Richard known that I didn't? The next morning I found the note. It wasn't dramatic. No sealed envelope. No last confession written in shaking handwriting. Just a folded piece of paper tucked inside Richard's nightstand, half hidden beneath old receipts and a pair of reading glasses he hadn't worn in months. I almost threw it away. It looked like nothing. But something, call it intuition or guilt, or the quiet voice that only shows up after loss, made me open it. 3 lines. That was all. If anything happens to me, don't trust what they tell you. Check the documents yourself. I'm sorry. I read it over and over, my heart pounding harder each time. They. Who was they? Ethan? Laura? Or people I hadn't even considered yet? I sank onto the edge of the bed, the room spinning slightly. Richard had been weak during his final weeks, but his mind had been sharp. He'd asked strange questions about bank accounts, legal papers, passwords I thought we both already knew. At the time I assumed it was fear. Now I wasn't so sure. Later that day I called Richard's lawyer, Daniel Harris. My voice sounded steadier than I felt as I introduced myself and explained why I was calling. There was a pause on the line. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. I was wondering when you'd call. We scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon. When I hung up, I noticed another detail I'd somehow missed in my shock. My house felt disturbed. Subtly. Nothing was obviously missing, but drawers weren't quite where I remembered them. A folder I usually kept in the study was gone. I checked the security camera logs. 2 days before Richard died, someone had been in the house. Not a stranger. Laura. She let herself in like she belonged there. I watched the footage in silence as she moved through the hallway, into the study, opening drawers with purpose, not curiosity. She knew what she was looking for. My chest tightened as the final truth settled in. Richard hadn't been afraid of dying. He'd been afraid of what would happen to me after he was gone. And for the first time since the funeral, my grief hardened into something else. Something colder. Something that refused to stay quiet. Daniel Harris's office was nothing like I imagined. No dark wood panels. No intimidating silence. Just glass walls, soft lighting, and a man who looked at me with something dangerously close to sympathy. I need to be very clear with you, he said once I sat down. What I'm about to show you may come as a shock. My hands tightened around my purse. I've already been shocked, I replied. I buried my husband alone. That earned me a long pause. Then he slid a folder across the desk. Richard updated his will 3 months before he passed. 3 months. That was after the diagnosis. After the family dinner stopped. After Ethan began canceling visits. After Laura started showing up more often, always helpful, always concerned, Daniel opened the folder. According to this, he said carefully, you are the sole beneficiary of Richard's estate. I blinked. That's not possible, I said. Richard always said everything would be split. Ethan. Daniel shook his head. He changed it. The house, the savings, the investment accounts, everything. All of it was left to me. For a brief, fragile moment I felt relief. Then Daniel continued. There's more. He pulled out another document. 2 weeks before Richard died, someone attempted to contest the will. My heart dropped. Who? He didn't answer right away. Then he said it. Your son. And Laura Reynolds. The room felt smaller, thicker, like the air itself was pressing in. They claimed, Daniel went on, that Richard was not of sound mind when he made the changes, and that you were manipulating him. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I was the one sitting by Richard's bed every night. I was the one holding his hand when he could barely breathe. I was the one he apologized to when the pain made him cruel. They never visited, I said quietly. Not once. Daniel nodded. That's not what they told the court. He turned the screen toward me. There were emails, statements, carefully written concerns about my emotional instability, about my financial dependence, about my unhealthy influence over Richard. Laura's words were everywhere. Polished, convincing, ruthless. They withdrew the claim after Richard passed, Daniel said. But they assumed you wouldn't read the details. They assumed you'd sign the settlement and move on. Why? I asked. Danielle met my eyes. Because they believed you were still the woman who wouldn't fight back. The truth settled over me slowly, painfully. They didn't come to the funeral because they thought they had already won. They thought I was alone. They were right about one thing. I was alone. But they were very wrong about what that meant. I didn't plan the confrontation. It happened the way most truths do, suddenly and without mercy. Ethan showed up at the house 3 days after the meeting with the lawyer. No call. No warning. Just his car in the driveway like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't skipped his own father's funeral. He didn't hug me. Didn't ask how I was holding up. His eyes went straight to the house, then back to me. So, he said, I guess you know. I stepped aside and let him in. The living room felt different with him there. Smaller. Colder. As if the walls remembered every argument we'd ever had and were holding their breath. Know what? I asked, though my voice already knew the answer. The will, he said. Laura told me you met with the lawyer. There it was. Not Dad told me. Not I'm sorry. Just business. She shouldn't have been in the house, I said quietly. I saw the footage. His jaw tightened. She was protecting us. From me. I asked. He didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, more for something to hold than because I was thirsty. Do you know what it felt like, I said, turning back to him, to stand at your father's funeral alone? Ethan exhaled sharply. You always do this, he said. You make everything about you. The words hit harder than I expected. I buried my husband, I said. You buried your mother. He looked away. Laura had taught him that move. Avoid the eyes. Control the narrative. You weren't easy to live with, he said finally. Dad was tired. Laura saw it. She helped him when you couldn't. I laughed again, that same hollow sound. I slept in a chair next to his hospital bed for weeks, I said. Where were you? He shrugged. I had my own life. There it was. The final verdict. Family to him was optional. What you don't understand, he continued, is that Laura and I were trying to make things fair. Dad wasn't thinking clearly. You had too much influence. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, defended, forgiven more times than I could count, and realized something terrifying. He truly believed this story. You chose her, I said. He met my eyes then, defiant. She chose logic. You choose drama. That was the moment something in me broke cleanly in two. Get out, I said. He frowned. What? You made your choice, I said. Now live with it. For a second I thought he might argue. Instead he grabbed his keys and walked out without looking back. As the door closed, the house went silent again. But this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt resolved. And for the first time since Richard died, I understood something clearly. Losing my family hurt. But losing the illusion of them was a kind of freedom. I didn't chase after Ethan. That surprised even me. A week earlier, I would have begged him to stay, to listen, to remember who I was to him. But grief changes you. Betrayal sharpens you. Instead, I let silence do what words never could. Laura was the first to break. She called me 3 days after Ethan left. Her voice was warm, falsely gentle, like someone stepping onto thin ice and pretending it was solid. I just wanted to check on you, she said. I know everything's been overwhelming. I said nothing. She kept talking. We should meet. Clear the air. There have been misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. I thought of her walking through my house, opening drawers like she owned them. I thought of the emails, the legal claims, the careful way she had erased me from my own life. I know about the will, she added quickly, the calm cracking just a little. Ethan told me you're upset. Upset? Still no apology. You assumed I wouldn't read it, I said at last. Silence. Then too carefully. Read what? I smiled. Everything. Her breath caught. I could hear it through the phone. You're imagining things, she said. You've been under a lot of stress. There it was, the same tactic repeated. Question my stability. Rewrite reality. I saw the footage, I said. You were in my house. This time the silence stretched longer. I was helping Richard, she said. He asked me to. He didn't, I said. He left me a note. I didn't tell her what it said. I didn't need to. The truth landed anyway. You're making a mistake, Laura said, her voice sharp now. Dragging this out won't end well for anyone. For you, I corrected. She hung up. That night I forwarded every email, every document, every piece of footage to Daniel Harris. I didn't ask what he planned to do with it. I already knew. The next morning Laura sent me a message for the first time in years. We need to talk. Please. I didn't reply. Because power doesn't announce itself. It waits. And somewhere between the funeral and that quiet morning, I stopped trying to be understood and started preparing to be believed. 2 weeks later, Daniel Harris called me early in the morning. We need to meet, he said. Today. That was all he had to say. When I arrived at his office, Laura was already there. She sat stiffly in the corner chair, hands folded in her lap, makeup flawless but eyes hollow. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Not once. Ethan stood near the window. He looked different. Tired. Uneasy. Older than the last time I'd seen him. Daniel didn't waste time. After reviewing the documents and security footage, he began. The court has agreed to reopen the matter under suspicion of attempted fraud and undue influence. Laura's head snapped up. This is ridiculous, she said. I was trying to help. Daniel slid a printed email across the table. One I had never seen before. It was from Laura to Ethan. Once your dad is gone, everything changes. Your mother won't survive this alone. We need to act before she controls the narrative. Ethan stared at the paper. What is this? He asked. Daniel answered calmly. This was sent 2 months before Richard passed. We recovered it from Richard's archived files. Laura's voice rose. That doesn't prove anything. Daniel turned to the next page. Bank transfers. Dates. Amounts. Small at first. Then larger. Money moved from joint accounts into an account Laura controlled, with Ethan listed as secondary access. The room went silent. Ethan's face drained of color. You told me this was temporary, he said. You said it was to protect Dad. Laura stood up. I was protecting you. No, Daniel said. You were positioning yourself. Ethan turned to me then. For the first time since the funeral, he really looked at me. I didn't know, he said weakly. I believed him. That didn't mean it didn't hurt. Richard's final safeguard was revealed last. A recorded statement. Daniel pressed play. My husband's voice filled the room, thin, strained, but unmistakably clear. If you're hearing this, Richard said, then it means I was right to be afraid. Laura, you overstepped. Ethan, you trusted the wrong person. And to my wife, if they've turned against you, I'm sorry I didn't stop it sooner. Ethan covered his mouth. I loved you, Richard continued. But love doesn't excuse betrayal. The recording ended. No one spoke. The truth had landed. Heavy. Final. Unmovable. Laura was escorted out later that day. As Ethan stood there, shattered and silent, I felt no triumph. Only clarity. The family I thought I lost hadn't been stolen. I had chosen to leave. And now there was only one question left. What would I do with the truth I had finally been given? The house was quiet again. Not the hollow silence of grief, but the kind that comes after a storm, when everything that could be broken already has been. Ethan didn't come with me when Laura was escorted out. He stayed behind, sitting in the same chair where he had once accused me of being dramatic. His shoulders were slumped, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said. I believed that too. But belief doesn't rewind time. I know, I replied. But intent doesn't erase impact. He looked up at me then, eyes red, voice barely holding together. Can we fix this? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was uncomfortable. Some things don't break loudly. They erode. Slowly. Quietly. Until one day there's nothing solid left to stand on. I don't know, I said honestly. And I'm done pretending that love means endless forgiveness. Weeks later I sold the house. The one Richard and I had filled with years of compromise and unspoken tension. I kept only what mattered. A few photographs, his watch, the note he had left behind. I donated the rest. Not out of bitterness but release. Ethan called once. Then again. I let the phone ring. Not as punishment. As protection. I moved somewhere no one knew my story. A small town. A smaller life. One built on truth instead of obligation. On the anniversary of Richard's death, I visited his grave alone. I placed fresh flowers on the grass and read his note one last time. I'm sorry. I know, I whispered. And for the first time I meant it for both of us. I didn't lose my family at his funeral. I lost the illusion of one. What I gained was harder, quieter, and far more valuable. Myself.